Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the February 3rd meeting of the Hyde Park Planning Board. I will note first that this meeting is being held under the auspices of Executive Order 202.92, the last extension of the original 202.1 by Governor Andrew Cuomo, which suspends the open meetings law so that public officers can meet virtually as long as we allow the public to attend. Let me first confirm that each board member is alone, or at least not under pressure to vote any certain way. Ms. Weiser?
I am alone.
Ms. Wasser?
I am alone.
Mr. Pickett?
I am alone.
Ms. DiNapoli?
I'm alone.
And Vice Chair Dexter.
I'm alone.
Thank you. Please join me as we pledge our fealty to the American flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. The first item on the agenda is a continued public hearing for Hudson Valley Hospice House. The applicants are seeking site plan and special use permit approvals, as well as a two-lot consolidation in order to build a new structure for patients at Hospice House. Making a motion to reopen the public hearing.
I'll make that motion. Pickett.
Thank you, Mr. Pickett.
Seconded.
Thank you. All in favor, please raise your hand. Say aye.
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 Aye. Any nays or abstentions? The motion carries. Let me try to, we've had a new submission, a revised submission, as well as new comments and responses, et cetera. So let's see. Michelle?
Yes.
There you are, sorry. It's sometimes hard hunting for these squares. Let me turn it over to you.
Okay. Since you last seen the Hudson Valley Hospice House, the overall site plan, which would be slide 2. I don't know if Neil's going to run the. Okay, slide 1 is Hospice House, the front. That's what it looks like, and then the second slide will be the site plan, and the site plan is basically the same, except that we've moved the oxygen.
I believe Michelle's internet is unstable.
Michelle, if you shut down your video, you might get audio back.
Oops.
Hi there, my computer just went black on me. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So the second slide here shows you the site plan. And what we've done on this site plan is it's pretty much the same, except that we've added an oxygen tank in the back by the basement door. We've moved the generator and propane tank around to the back. And we also moved the refuse enclosure to the back. You can now see that the bioretentions are a little bit more, the change in shape, because they've now been designed for the proper water quality. And we've added a detention basin. And then we've also improved some grading, which is a complicated plan. So I'm not showing that one. And part of the reason for the detailed grade with the detailed grading is another reason why we had to move the refuse enclosure farther back. Since the last time, we've done a full stormwater design. Again, there's the bioretentions, and I've added into the bioretention areas shagbark hickories. There's a detention basin, and the detention basin outlet is actually a series of chambers with weep holes. So water will spill into these chambers, and then as they fill up, it'll go through small weep holes, and this will provide slow down and reduce the velocity. Then they'll go to a stone sand berm level spreader And for this, the water just sort of flows through the sand and stone and it'll overtop, but the smaller storms will trickle through, bigger storms will go over the top. The pipe is now fully designed that will carry water around the development. This is the water that's coming from the offsite southeast in a low area. So that water will be taken care of. The water from the southeast, which flows onto the property, will be directed to the detention basin for control before leaving the site. We will be performing more deep tests. And if we do find shallow groundwater, the DEC has a contingency where you just line the bioretentions. We don't have a plaza at the road because we don't feel that this is needed, this extra impervious area. There's really nobody that ever uses the road. I don't even know, there's a bus stop farther, is at the intersection. You know, this area has never become the hamlet it wanted to be, so it just seems like an impervious area that's not needed. The same way with a sidewalk from Violet Avenue to the building also seems like additional impervious that's not needed. Most people in shopping centers or rural neighborhoods seem to be able to walk along the roads just fine. So the few people that might want to walk between Violet Avenue and the building would be able to just walk down this low use driveway. The other thing too is this is a site that doesn't really want strangers just wandering in. They want to have their peace and quiet and not really have gawkers come through. The landscaping is similar to what it was before. A few trees have been moved around because of grading. There are fences along to block the headlights. This will also block some of the noise. Although there won't be much noise on the site, just some typical quiet sounds, but the fences will help. There's maples and hickories in addition to the previous landscaping, have been added to the bioretention. Other trees and plants are proposed on the bioretention plan, which would be, on the landscape plan, which would be slide 4. And then the area of trees to the south, that area is sparsely trees. If those of you who remember who went on the site walk, there are trees out there, but they're spread out with lots of the rose cane underneath. So this area is not really going to be put into preservation because it's going to need maintenance. Those rose canes are invasive species. The building there's trees proposed along the road. The one section by the bioretention where there are no trees are proposed is because that the bioretention will be 5 foot high and it's going to provide its own screening. So that covers the majority of the items. I would be very interested in hearing the planning board's comments and opinions on this project. So Chairman Dupree, I'll send it back to you.
Thank you. Board members, do you want to go first for once instead of having the consultant speak? I don't see Mr. Sotero here.
There he is.
He's
You see him?
I'm here.
Well, I hear you. For some reason, you're not showing. Oh, there you are, Peter. Sorry. Yes. I'm telling you, I'm losing this. So board members, do you want to go first? Let's break with tradition tonight. How about starting with Diane? Ms. DiNapoli.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. I did hear, Michelle, you talking about the not having a need to have benches and any landscape at the opening at G.
There is landscape. We're proposing trees up there. We just didn't know if there'd be a purpose to have benches up there since
Yeah.
it's
Well, I
isolated.
do think benches are important, not only because unless you're only going to hire staff that guarantee only drive with cars, you have employees that will be taking buses, public transportation. And I could see them, that would be a courtesy, not only for them to have it, but I could also see, if not the residents there themselves, family members there who have been there with their loved ones, wanting to go for a walk, and before they turned around and walked back down, I could see them wanting to sit, especially if it's nicely landscaped. So I do think a bench or two would be important in the area. I'm also still very concerned about the two-way traffic going around the building. I read very clearly your comments, but if it's a 20-foot wide driveway, why couldn't everyone just go in one direction? Why does it have to be two-way?
Two-way allows for the different services to be able to use it. Most of the people that come to visit are just going to go into the parking lot and back out. The back driveway is primarily going to be for the different services that need to use
Right.
it. It's a 22-foot wide road, which means 11-foot lanes. Your standard highway is 11-foot lane. So it's really not as narrow as it appears as you think it is.
So if you made it 20 feet, that's more than sufficient just to keep it as a one-way road.
Well, it's two
And
ways
you
to
save
allow
and
trucks. Different trucks have to come in different directions depending on what they're doing.
Why would that be, Michelle? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah.
Depends on where they want to stop to, because it's fairly steep going down to the back and then it flattens out. So if they want to be able to stop, so they're at say the back end of the oxygen tank, they would have to go counterclockwise. If they want to stop so that the basement door, they would have to go clockwise. They want the back end of their vehicles to be in those locations. This is not high traffic, and it is 22 wide, so it's two 11-foot lanes.
Well, that's why, I mean, if it's not, if it's not a high like traffic area, then I mean, that kind of makes more of an argument for having it a one, way system, and I think and I'm sorry, Diane, I didn't mean to jump in, but just while I was thinking about it, most of the the tanks that are going to be like serviced are right in the same area, I believe, right? I'm looking at, okay.
But I don't know which end of the truck is going to be, which end of the tank the truck is going to have to be at, and which end of the truck has to be there.
Couldn't you design it so that everything goes in the flow of a one-way direction? Like, what does the garbage truck have to go counterclockwise?
Yeah, well, actually, I've turned that around, so now the garbage truck is going clockwise. Because when I read it went clockwise.
But couldn't the other reasons for needing to have trucks deliveries in that area all be in the same area, so it's just in one direction?
I can make it one way. I just don't know if when they actually start using this, and I'm really not worried because it's such slow traffic.
Yeah.
And 22-foot wide is a reasonable width. Two trucks could on it.
Well, then why not make it all one direction and make it small and make it 20 feet? So you save 2 feet of impervious area.
Because of the fire truck codes. And you're coming
So
down.
it was 20 feet you had to be.
Now I have to relook at it. I can make it.
According to your response letter of November 30th, 2020, in FPA 1 International Fire Code, the road drive width must be 20 feet minimum.
Yeah, it's a minimum, and you're in the back there where there's a propane tank and an oxygen tank and access to the building, but I can make it one way.
Yeah.
That's not a problem.
I may be the only one, so why don't you wait and hear what my other board members think? And that was my one of my biggest concerns. And the other is having a bench at the front. In terms of having trees along 9G, Michael, that was a question you asked. I have mixed feelings about that, basically because it is such an attractive looking building. I think being able to see it as you're whizzing by is an asset, unless of course the trees are there for the privacy of the people who are there. If that's the purpose of it, then I have absolutely no issue of it.
Can I just insert one thing while board members are going around? There were the 2 points. One, Diane, that you already brought up about having a few benches, little something in front, but also for people to be able to walk from the front back to the building without walking in the driveway. So that was the other comment. And again, looking to hear what planning board members have to say.
Thank you. And remember, Diane, that trees planted along 9G can always be limbed up so that you can have a view of the attractive building, while
Sure.
still providing some shade for people who walk along the sidewalk. Let me call up Ms. Wasser. How about you next?
All righty, thank you. I feel strongly about the sidewalk along that edge. I just don't like people having to walk down a driveway. I don't think that's really very good planning. I doubt this is going to attract what was it called, gawkers and strangers. So I feel strongly about adding the sidewalk. The bench, it's just a bench. I mean, because I think there's still going to be people who are going to be picked up, dropped off, use public transportation and walk. And I agree with that comment. I don't have strong feelings about the two-way direction at all. I'm kind of fine with that as is. I appreciated Pete's detailed comments, and especially I'm still a little concerned about protecting existing adjacent wells and foundations. So I'm glad that Pete added, he wants distances to the individual wells and some kind of measuring beforehand. So just to protect the neighbors' interests on that. And I think we could use a few more trees along 9G, especially screen a little bit of that parking on the northern edge. And actually, I also had a comment on those long vinyl fences that are on the southeast. Well, there's a long one and a short one. There's only 2 trees in that section that doesn't have fence, that is behind a home. And I think something else should be put there. Do people know what I'm talking about?
Okay, yeah, that's in front of the automotive place. It's kind of no area, but we can add more trees.
Well, I don't know. I'll wait and hear what some of my colleagues have to say. And I also agree with Pete's comments on clarifying all of the perimeter trees, quote, to remain, and showing that more carefully about what you're taking out and what you're leaving. So I think those are my comments. That's it.
Ms. Wasser, thank you. Vice Chair Dexter, do you want to weigh in?
Oops, there we go. Yes, interesting discussion. So interesting about the one-way versus two-way, and I'm not sure I care too much about one-way versus two-way, but I think you can get away with the minimum standard, and if it is 20 feet, to me that would be preferable than putting in extra when you may not need it. I would imagine it's going to be very rare when you're going to have deliveries all hitting at the same time. I remember, Michael, remember when we had Dunkin' Donuts and we were worried about how they were going to deliver things, and they were like, that truck goes south on 9G at 7:30 on Tuesday mornings.
Yeah, right.
Comes up Route 9 northbound. It was like, oh, okay. So most of these places will know and can schedule their deliveries. And you probably, I mean, you can't say now how frequently the oxygen delivery is going to be, but you do know that you can probably work with them. And I do buy that. I think that's fine. I'd rather see it less pervious. So if you can get away with the 20 feet, and if that is the standard, I'd prefer to have that. And I thought I cared about the benches at the end of the driveway. And then I started to think, it is 200 feet away. If you could anchor them in somehow, I think that would be great. The problem is the benches would walk if they're not like permanent. We tried to install a bench, just a nice little bench somewhere for people who were waiting for buses, and it was stolen within like 2 weeks. So if you could do that, I do believe that people who are waiting for the bus, because I do believe that you will have employees who will use public transportation. I would like to see that. And the other part was about the walkway from the building to 9G. Interestingly, when my dad was at a local nursing home, we did most of our walking in the walkway. There were some sidewalks, but it turned out that the road was actually better maintained and had less dips and bumps and things to trip over. So we did most of our walking, and there really isn't the traffic. If a car does come in, there's plenty of room to pull over. And again, I'm not really interested in seeing any more impervious on the site. So I don't really think a walkway is needed at this point. I think that was it.
Thanks, Anne. Nice as always. Let's see. Ann Weiser, there you are. Sorry.
Hi. So yeah, I'm in agreement about the benches because I do believe that employees and family members there may be family members taking public transit as well. So I think a place for them to wait for a bus, and you can always flag a bus. It doesn't need to. You don't need to have a formal bus stop to catch a bus. So you can be waiting, sitting on a bench and then flag a bus. So because of that, I think that a place for them to wait would be good. Plus, I do think the sidewalk from 9G I think that sidewalk is important. I think it's uncivilized to ask people to walk on the road. I really think that we should, provide them with a sidewalk that feels safe. So, and I don't have an opinion on the two-way or the one-way. So just kind of, I'm directional neutral on that one. That's it.
Thank you. And Mr. Pickett?
Thank you. I prefer the sidewalk. It would need to be maintained over time, but in walking from the site up to 9G, I'd prefer to see it. The trees that you have along 9G, instead of being a straight line, I'd like to see them with staggered depths from the edge of the road, so it'd look more natural. You have a very nice, good-looking site, and I think staggering the depth of the trees through there would keep it looking natural. I've got no preference on the one-way or two ways, but if you wanted to go to 20 feet, you could always bump it up to 22 right near the tanks that you would service. So those are my inputs.
Wow, board members, you were succinct tonight and on.
Michael, did I wait? I don't remember if I weighed in about the sidewalk.
You did.
You did?
I did.
Need benches and sidewalk from the street for staff and employees. Concerned about two-way direction for the roadway in the rear.
Then I misspoke. because I shouldn't have clumped the sidewalks in with the benches. My mistake.
What about
Well,
Brent
I,
on the
I,
bench?
I don't think sidewalks are essential. Sorry about that.
Let's go to the consultants. Ms. Axelson?
I was most interested to hear, what the planning board really felt about those things in the front. If it's okay, I might skip around a bit because the next big set of comments is Pete with the rock and all that. I mean, the submittal was very substantial. A lot of information was provided. It would help to have some more clarity on the limits of disturbance and to have that line shown on more of the plan sheets because it relates to grading, landscaping, etc. And then I think the board already touched on the notation about existing wooded areas, and that language that we put in the comments was crafted in part with Michael and Tad, I believe, and whoever else was at the agenda meeting, because there's a history of the board asking for existing wooded areas to be left in a natural state. So I tried to write that as we saw fit. Let's see. We had some concerns about clarity on ramps, especially with the ambulance access to the building, to see if more of that curb could be dropped. And then I had suggested several more trees along the northern site boundary to buffer the two northern parking areas that are there. And another comment that I have, and I don't know if the board wants to weigh in on this, the fence, which is, proposed generously, the privacy fence on the north and along the south, it's proposed as white, which I felt would stand out. And so I'm suggesting in my comments a grayish color or gray brown. Let's see. The lighting plan looked pretty good. We just need some details there. And then Pete and I both wondered how employees would get to the refuse enclosure, if there could be some kind of pathway for them to be safe with trucks going on behind the building.
Well, can I follow up on that, Liz, just a
Yeah,
second while
go
we're
for
on
it,
refuse enclosure? It also seemed like the refuse enclosure was very far away from the building. And I was just wondering if that can be relocated somewhere else that may be more convenient for the employees. It just seemed like it was a long walk, and again, how they were going to get there safely. So, all right, Liz, sorry.
No, that's fine. And some of our comments kind of dovetail and overlap. I believe there's a possibility of phasing on this site, so it would be helpful to see the phasing plan. And correct me if I'm wrong, Pete, but I think phasing is also kind of a mitigation for erosion and sedimentation control. And, a lot of the comments had to do with a little bit more clarity about limit of disturbance lines and retaining wooded area lines. And I think there were, let's see, hang on. And then I thought a few more trees at the south end of the building would be a good idea. Because there's kind of a thin line of retained vegetation. And if it sounds like it's kind of scrappy, maybe deciduous, maybe some cedars. So maybe a couple more trees down there. Those are my big issues. And the board has already commented on the pedestrian facilities.
Thank you, Liz. Mr. Zotero?
Sure. I'm sorry about, the video. I know everybody would like to see my lovely, face, but I'm having internet, issues also. So, before I get into a couple of the engineering things, one other thing that, I noticed was that on the southern property line, that there's a privacy fence proposed. And based upon a site walk that we had out there to look at the drainage, most of the houses along Dorsey Lane sit much higher than the property line. So in my opinion, I don't think a 6-foot fence will do anything. Plus they would have to take down some trees to put it in. So in my opinion, it would be best to basically leave that area in its, you know, natural state, and possibly if there's a visual, you know, issue from the neighbors towards, you know, the building, maybe put in a couple more evergreens around the access like road. I mean, that's something that, you know, the board can go look at. It's really not under my purview, but I just wanted to mention, I don't think that like fence is going to do much good. And, you know, there's no sense in spending the money and also taking down the trees there to put it in. So that's something that can be discussed. As far as some of the comments, I did mention about, you know, rock. As we all know, we discussed rock a lot during the seeker process. So now that the plans are more detailed, as Michelle stated, there's a fairly significant drainage line going around the front of the property, along the northern property, and ending up in the back. And that drainage line is, you know, in some cases 9 to 10 foot, you know, deep. So you know, I would assume that that's going to be into some rock. You know, it's hard to tell, you know, but we know there's a lot of rock on the site. So, and Michelle had mentioned that they were going to do some additional soil tests for the stormwater, you know, facilities. So I recommend that there be some more deep tests done also in areas where we're going to have some deep excavation, such as that drainage line that I mentioned. There's also the force main for the sewage pump station, which will be about 4.5 feet below grade, and then maybe a couple more deep tests while they're going to have an excavator out there, a couple more deep tests in the building area to try and further, you know, define, you know, the rock. Because, you know, we are concerned, especially on, we had a couple wells that were on the adjoining properties to the north that were actually, I think one was within a couple 100 feet of the building. And now that we know that there's going to be a drainage line there that's fairly like deep, that's just something we're going to have to, you know, to watch. And I think honestly, and I think that the owner of the property, you know, will also want to know how much he's getting into, because it's going to be a, you know, a major cost implication. So, you know, the deep tests are not only for, you know, our use and, you know, mitigating any impacts, but it's a cost impact for the, you know, the owner. So,
Pete, are you recommending these deep tests? But what's the timing of these tests? Is it now before approval is granted? Is it after,
yes.
but before building permit?
Oh, no. Now, and that's something that, you know, Michelle would have to do also, is when she had mentioned about additional deep tests for the stormwater. Those have to be done as part of the approval process. All right. So to that end, also about rock, we talked during the seeker, or during the prior like review, when we were going through seeker, we talked about crushing. So assuming that that's still on the table, there should be an area shown on the map of where the soil stockpiles, where the rock stockpiles, you know, would be, and where the crushing operation would take place. And you know, we'd have to look at the hours of operation, similar to what we did on the Belfield site. So that's something we're going to need. So let me go to a couple other things. Hit rock crushing. Refuse enclosure. Michelle, where do you stand in terms of when you think you're going to make an application to the Department of Health?
Well, we submitted initial one last spring or last summer, and we're going to be doing a follow-up one this week or next week.
Okay, because one thing I mentioned there was, you know, the well that you're going to have to put in, you're going to have to go and drill the well And, right, that's because it's going to be classified as a public water supply. So I assume they're going to make you do some kind of a drawdown test and obviously test it for water quality.
Yes, yeah, we'll have to do the complete Part 5 testing and
Okay.
24-hour drawdown.
All right. So depending on the pump test requirements, and how much it's going to be pumped at, we may need to talk to the health department about some of the wells that are closer on the northern, property line, in terms of, the potential for maybe asking, the property owners whether you'd have the right to monitor their wells during the drawdown. So once you get into the health department, maybe that's something that we can, work together on with Jason Teed, what the pump test requirements are going to be. Let me see here. So, but talked about the privacy fence, talked about the refuse enclosure, I think those were my major engineering comments. The other thing I did mention was, Michelle, I wasn't sure in the ambulance drop-off area. It seemed like there was only one small ramp that they could use. And I don't know, the grades in that area, but I was just curious whether that whole area could be a depressed, curb and have a reasonable slope from the drop-off area to the building.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I'll check with the architect who's the expert in hospice.
Okay, well, they're gonna go pull up and then, the ramp is at the opposite end. Well, again, depending on how we're gonna do, the traffic, flow. Then, the ramp is at one end of the, the drop-off area. So again, it's something you could just go look at, it might be something that you may want to consider.
Yes, I'll discuss it with the architect.
And I think, I just had a question. I wasn't sure what a evaporator was.
That's part of the oxygen system.
Oxygen, okay, all right. And I think that was it for, the highlights.
And just
Okay.
Pete and the board knows there are very detailed notes about construction, demolition, excavation, and hours, and referencing the code, and detailed rock excavation notes. So
Thank you. Ms. Moss, comments? None?
No, no comments. Thank you.
Ms. Polidoro?
I just want to let the board know that the zoning board has not voted on the variance request yet. And so the public hearing should be continued at least for one more meeting until we know how the zoning board will decide.
Thank you. I was just going to say they'd closed the public hearing, but just as we do, they left it open with the proviso that written comments be accepted for 10 days. And this would be the 7th day, I believe. No. So there's still an opportunity for people to submit comments on the variance, the area variance that's there. So thanks, colleagues. Before I add in my comments, I think we should hear from the public. Let me start with, Mr. Pickett.
Question, the fencing that you're talking about, it's a polymer fence. Is it for security or more visual blocking, or?
It's for the benefit of the neighbors to block headlights and some noise.
Okay, all right, because those polymer.
One of the
where it's gonna
comments
be Sometimes,
for the zoning board from one of the neighbors was, if the building goes in, I'll have to install a fence.
okay. Because sometimes those fences, I've got them. And you need high pressure spray them or bleach them, and yeah, if you're blocking headlights, you need that. Otherwise, I thought maybe a green like chain link fence, 4 foot, 6 foot, since you're out kind of in a forested area, might look better. But if you're blocking headlights, that doesn't do it. Thank you.
Yeah, and I agreed with Liz on the gray brown color when you were talking about color for fence, because it really blends into trees better.
I agree.
Michael, if I could just add one thing before we open up to
Sure.
the public, I forgot. On the discussion regards to one-way or two-way, I think we're going to reduce it to 20 feet. Being it's not going to be a high traffic area, I don't know that it's a big issue that if it's reduced to 20 feet, that if you keep it at two-way and stripe it, I don't think 10-foot lanes are really an issue. In fact, we're doing a fairly large site subdivision development project in another municipality, and the highway superintendent there has actually requested 20-foot wide roads, and it's a fairly large project. So I don't know, Michelle, something for you to think about. I don't know if anybody else has any thoughts on that, but I don't personally think it's an issue if you reduce it to 20 and keep it two-way, because I don't think there's going to be a lot of traffic back there, as you say. So,
There's a couple of steep slopes going down around the building, but there
so
will not be a lot of traffic. It'll be, a couple times a day, maybe.
yeah. Okay, so I just wanted to add that before we turn it over to the public. Thank you.
Let me go and order people how they signed up. Ms. Hudak, you're first. You need to unmute yourself.
Hi, sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, Michelle, could I see the map again of the site plan? Would you mind bringing that up if you could? I just wanted to see like where the dumpsters and things like that would be.
Neil, that's number 2. It'll be the second slide. Okay, the dumpsters are in the back between it's kind of a shaded area, which is where the oxygen tank is.
Mhm.
You know where the car repair place is. So
Yes.
just north of the car repair place, kind of like northwest corner of the car repair place, there's a little bump out that's a little rectangle that's coming down off the driveway next to the bioretention.
Okay.
That's where the dumpster is located.
I think it'd be helpful if you could use a pointer on the plan just to make sure
Yeah.
it's clear, everyone's clear. Whoever's screen, I don't know if it's Neil's screen or your screen, but
It's Neil. There it is. He's got it.
Perfect.
great.
Circle.
Thank you, Neil.
Thank you.
Yeah. And then the septic system and the well that we're talking about, just.
Okay, the well is in the courtyard in the middle of right next to the building, the back of the building in the courtyard. Yes, right there.
Okay.
That's the well.
Okay.
And the septic system on the left side, you'll see two kind of like two rectangles together.
Mhm.
The big open area, that's where the absorption fields will be.
Up against 9G, yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
over there. Okay. Thank you. Okay. And I would just like to, reiterate and stress the evergreen plantings and the trees, just for the privacy, because we can see right through to 9G, when the leaves are off the trees, and the noise, it would help with the noise. So those are my main concerns, the privacy for the neighbors and our wells, of course. So thank you.
Hudak.
Yeah.
And I caught the whole concept about the evergreens, both
Yeah.
for views, privacy, and for noise attenuation.
Mhm.
So thank you. And
Yes.
next up was Ms. DiGilio. Susan?
Hi. Hi. I just want to thank the board for such a wonderful job of taking everything into consideration, that all of our concerns. The only thing I have to say is a dark fence with some cedar trees would be lovely. Thank you.
I agree with you that we're going to need to, I didn't know this, but at our agenda meeting, I Googled while we were at our Zoom and looked at all the colors for vinyl fences. I just assumed they were white and gray. That's all I've ever seen. They come in every color, including hot pink, of all things. So I don't know why you want a hot pink fence. I guess maybe Baskin Robbins, they still have those. But at any rate,
Probably.
I was going to echo my colleagues that a natural earth tone color such as gray, brown would blend in better than what the white would. And there's no difference in the cost whatsoever for the different colors. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you.
And Mr. Leonard?
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for taking the time and considering all of us as a neighborhood. We do appreciate that. As far as the looking and viewing from the neighborhood that we have, 6 foot wouldn't be high enough because I look into Sue's second story. So 6 feet isn't going to be enough. And as a discussion that you're having, thank you for viewing it as what we see, and that's important. So if it was fencing and trees, I think the noise and visual and blocking would be sufficient if we consider that something for everyone. In addition, thank you, Pete, for coming out. I do appreciate that and taking your time to consider the neighborhood for the water problems, the wells, and everything involved. Sufficient drainage is necessary because it affects all of us. Is there something that's going to be put in place for an oil separator for the parking lot? That's something that would be considered. And I don't know if anybody really looked into that because it is going to be blacktopped. And if you have a spill or something, it's going to go in the drainage. So that might be something to consider. I'm not sure if it's necessary or something like that.
As far as I know, Mr. Leonard, the DEC requires a distance for separation of oil for things, ironically, for fueling stations, although they don't for, say, Dunkin' Donuts, where you have, or McDonald's, or any of the fast food restaurants where you have cars idling, which to me seems like a bigger problem myself. But
Yeah.
at any rate, he can probably elucidate on that for me better than I can.
We agree, and it's a question, and I don't know all the rules, so that's why I asked the question. And sometimes people don't ask it because they're unaware of what could be out there to prevent these problems. The drainage water, it's going into the environment, and it's just one of those things that we like to protect the environment. So with that, I still say thank you to everyone and keep up the good work for protecting everything. Higher fence, more trees for the neighborhood. The well inspection prior, definitely. Afterwards, definitely. A depth for doing the inspections to the wells, as Pete had mentioned, my well's 25 feet. So to do a deep well test isn't something for me. Mine's affected at 25 feet, whereas Sue's is affected at 25 feet also. So this area is in a range of 25 feet to the next house over is at 400. So that's the difference that we have that can affect everyone differently. So the testing has to be posed for that. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Okay. Well, perfect. Thank you very much for taking the time for us and hearing us. It does mean a lot.
As always, let me thank the three of you for coming out because, again, our reviews are shaped better when we hear from neighbors and residents because unless one of us happens to live nearby, we're not going to know all the things that you do. And you gave us a great amount of knowledge last time. I also thanked Peter when he came out, told us what the results were, et cetera. Peter, I don't believe that an oil separator is needed in something like this, is it?
No, it's not considered a hot spot area. I mean, it's typically the bioretention areas and all that provide, the treatment that the DEC, requires for a standard, parking lot. So.
Thank you. So let me go back up and summarize some stuff. I'm going to weigh in and say that I also think that the sidewalk is necessary. 108-4.5C3A basically says pedestrian access should be provided from the street to all uses on a site. In this case, this is a brand new site, so I don't see a reason why not to. I agree that there may be in the future more people needing to come to this site, but who use public transportation, and we need to make sure they have safe access to the interior. I agree that there are still concerns for blasting and the drilling of rock, but Pete's talked about how to do that. I agree with Pete that since some of the storm drain lines that run north from the property lines are 9 to 10 feet deep, more deep testing should be done. I want to encourage you to start the discussion also with the Department of Transportation, if you haven't already done so, Michelle, just because they've been a little odd to deal with lately, I'll put it that way. I'm going to agree in the color of the vinyl fencing, brown, dark gray, something that would make it look more earth tone. I also shared Pete's concern about the refuse enclosure. I didn't see a sidewalk to it. I assume it's just going to be an all one pad, if that's it. But I also, Michelle, maybe you can, or Mr. Kaminsky, one of the two of you can clarify. Are people going to be going from the dumpster or to the dumpster or the refuse enclosure? Are they going to be going out of the basement and then just walking down the road? Is that it? Or has that been planned out?
That'll probably be the primary. The other location, they would have had to gone out of the main building.
That's what I thought. This looks like it's not that bad to me, except for maybe winter when we have snows like we've just had about trying to get trash out.
Yeah,
I was just going to add, not every staff member is going to be needing to access the dumpster area. It's really just housekeeping, which generally are there in the evening and nights. So.
Yep. I also, the ramp for the ambulance access doesn't look that big, but then again, I will trust Mr. Machado because that's what he does in terms of being an architect, is designed specifically places like this. But Michelle, I noticed you said that you would check as well. And then Pete touched on the fact that since it's a public water supply, that there will need to be additional testing and monitoring perhaps of adjacent properties to see if the wells are impacted. I know that Ms. Zerfas has already given us information that this is, because this is so much lower, it's going to be a deep well, that it's unlikely that it will impact the wells, but we need to make sure, as the neighbors have said, that actually needs to be true. I will also agree, by the way, with Ms. Dexter that benches would be great, but I also think that they need to be anchored. You can take a look at the ones that are along 9 right now. I love it when Ann said they walk away, and I'm like, not by themselves, because I see this a lot. I also don't have a preference for one-way versus two-way. I think it'd be great if we're going to be talking about adding a plaza and a sidewalk from the entry into the building, that you would reduce the impervious in the back. I also agree with Ms. Axelson that more trees along the south side of the building would be desirable because there's not that much left there. And also, even though Ms. Moss did not speak, and I will let her speak after me if she disagrees, but when we leave notes that talk about existing trees to remain, that doesn't mean that you can't go through and selectively take out invasives like ailanthus or the tree of heaven, tree of life, get rid of the Rosa rugosa canes. There's lots of stuff that I could see in there, Michelle, that's invasive. And we don't, I mean, the woods sort of help, a thicket kind of still helps screen and do noise attenuation. But at the same time, you don't want it to look junky either or be unsafe. The question I had was when you added the one about trees that are leaning, I'm not sure that that's, just so everyone knows, there's no such thing as a arborist with a license in this state. Anybody who wants to be an arborist can say, I'm an arborist. There's no test, there's no license, no permit, nothing. You would hope that they're educated. But a lot of times you'll have people saying that tree looks dangerous because it's arching. There's no danger to it. Trees don't have tap roots. They all pretty much grow their roots out unless they're anchored into rock where they fall into a crevice. That doesn't mean they can't blow over, but it's usually unlikely. Tad, do you want to weigh in on that? About the natural state?
I think that what I'm thinking of is the old Stop and Shop.
Yep.
That was maintained, quote unquote, in a natural state, and there were vines growing all over the trees, and there were invasives, and you couldn't see through to the parking area or the building. And the site plan had a note that it was to be maintained in a park-like state. And when the property changed hands, they did maintain it in a park-like state, and it's beautiful. So I want the applicant and the board to think about how they want that to look. Do they want grass beneath the older trees? Do they want thickets of vegetation to provide more screening? Just to realize that the language of the note makes a difference.
And the reason why I asked Tad to weigh in is when you leave it in a completely natural state, it does mean that the crowding can actually reduce the health of the good trees you want for, I guess, for everybody. When the prior owners, Stop and Shop, were putting it on the market, they approached Tad and me about actually going on site with them and us taping trees we thought should be retained. If you can remember, before it got limbed up and cleaned up, you couldn't even see the Stop and Shop. It was like a Sleeping Beauty's thicket back there. You had to chop your way through to find anything. When Tad and I took our site walk, we had like 4 things of tape thinking, we're going to protect a lot of these trees. And when we actually looked more closely, a lot of them become diseased because, that's why silviculture happens. That's why sometimes selective tree removal is healthier for the forest trees you have. So at any rate, I just want the board to think about this because, again, the thicket would provide more screening, at least during leaf on. But it also means that there's more maintenance for the applicant over time, and it doesn't sort of seem to have, it wouldn't have that sort of park-like environment. And this is also for the applicants to think about too. Otherwise, that's all I have. I think that from our neighbors who spoke, it appears that evergreen plantings are important as well as the fence. Mr. Leonard, just for you, where the fence is located, it can't be higher than 6 feet without going for another area variance, which I doubt the applicants want to go to. It would have to be brought in from, let's see, within the, I think that would be a front yard setback, because there's a road access, you can access Dorsey. But even then, there's a limit to how tall they can go. I think evergreens are probably going to be more of what you want because they'll look more natural.
Choice of tree could be something that you could use as well to cause it to be a fence, and that would be something that we could do, and that would definitely be appreciated. I did have another question.
Sure.
Under the testing that's going to be done for the wells, where would we go to get the information, or is it possible for one of us to be designated to give it to our neighbors so that you could send it to us?
Well, Brian, if I could just, what do you mean by, testing in the wells? Do you mean?
When you do the testing and you wanted to find out if it was going to impact us, is that going to be information that's shared, or is it?
So what typically happens with that is, I, as the engineer for the town, or any engineer for the town, would work with the applicant and the county health department if we, as the engineer for the town, thought there was a concern about potential drawdown to neighbors' wells.
Yes.
We would work with the health department and the applicant, and then if it was deemed that, hey, maybe we should look at monitoring adjacent property owners' wells, then what would have to happen is that the applicant would send the property owner a letter, and I have done this on some of our private development jobs in the past. So what you do is you send the property owner like a letter and say, we're going to do some pump tests. We would like to monitor your well, for drawdown, and there's certain things, that you're not supposed to use, the well while the pump test is going on, yada yada. So there's some things. So any property owner would have to sign a agreement, and it's not a like invasive thing. They just, well, the other problem is I don't know if any of those wells out there have like well caps, or if they're like buried like wells. If they're buried wells, that's kind of an issue.
Mine's buried.
All right. Well, all right. I mean, that's just something that we'll have to deal with. But, the bottom line is, if there was some monitoring that was deemed necessary, the property owner would get a letter well in advance
Perfect.
That they would have to agree to, the monitoring and sign off on it and send it back. And so that's typically what happens.
Is there going to be notice sent when you do the test? So if we notice, let's just give it a hypothetical of the next day or 3 days later, we notice that our water changed or the smell changed or something like that. So we know that it's not something that is happening to just us. It's something that happened while you did that.
So I think what you're like referring to is if the health department and and others said, look, we don't think that you need to monitor any wells. You're asking, I think, if the neighbors can be notified regardless of when the pump test is going to be done. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So, I mean, that's a planning board like decision. If the planning board says, look, we don't have a problem, like notifying, I mean, we can certainly go find that out and we can send out, letters. I mean, but that's really a planning board decision.
Now,
Right, so
also,
Pete, just to be clear though, no one has made the decision that there needs to be monitoring. yet.
No.
we understand that.
Okay.
No, but they're talking about, what Brian's talking about is if there wasn't going to be any formal monitoring of their wells by putting a piezometer inside the well and recording the levels and all that kind of stuff. If that wasn't deemed necessary, what Brian is just asking is, can somebody let us know in like advance of when the applicant is going to do the pump test on their on-site well?
Yes.
And Ms. Zerfus, I believe, can say, I hope will say yes. And then she can just send that to Cynthia and I, and then we can send that out to you guys because we have your emails because you've been using your emails to register to come and speak. And we can also
Yes.
send out a letter, but if you prefer, snail mail.
Okay, yes, I'll come up with something because this is, normally the monitoring's done on much higher well yield tests.
No, I agree.
So
So, we'll have to see,
So I'll have to modify the standard letter and I'll send it through the town for the town to send out to the neighbors. Because this is a town asking for this.
Yeah.
Now, in addition, this is a question for you, Pete. Does 9G have a water source right there for the building?
No,
Or does it end at the intersection?
Yes, intersection ends at the intersection.
Would it be something that's possible to extend that from the intersection as a water source for that building?
Pete,
Would that be
I'll answer that. I've already had discussions with the health department on that. That water source is having some issues.
Okay.
So trying to extend it, in fact, when they extended the water for the condos, apartments across the road there, they went a different direction because that water system is not capable.
I didn't know where it went. That's why I asked that question.
Right. No, it's a good question, but it goes to the intersection and it's not.
It would have made things easy.
Well, we looked at that first because that would be our
Right.
preference.
And I figured that's why you were going in that direction for a while because of that, but still have to pose the question. But thank you.
They did check that out. That's actually Town of Poughkeepsie Water District.
Yes.
It's not Hyde Park. That's the other problem. So that they said no, that the applicants have no guarantee of being in it. And that's why they asked, because if they're having problems right now, they're not going to extend it out to let anybody else in right now. It is a good question.
Okay. Well, thank you again for everything. We do appreciate it as a neighborhood.
Thanks, Michelle. Thanks, everybody. I don't think there's anything else left tonight. Michelle, I know you take. Yes.
I just
Liz?
want to make a suggestion because Tad and I have done this in the past. But maybe to confer with Michelle about what's out there as far as existing vegetation and try to tailor the recommended notation to better fit the site.
Well, as long as we're at it, before we adjourn this, let me just go through a quick rundown. So you all know what the Sake Brewery now looks like, the trees along Route 9 and along St. Andrews. Do you want something like that, or would you prefer to see it more thickety and wild and natural, untamed, so to speak. Anne, let me start with you, Wiser.
Well, I'm in favor of a park-like setting. So I find, and I think for the site and for the purpose of the hospice, that kind of look is also very soothing. So park-like for me.
I agree. Stephanie?
I'm fine with that as well. I don't have strong feelings about it.
Okay. Brent? Mr. Pickett?
I prefer a more natural setting with staggered trees, distance from the street coming back.
Thank you. Ms. Dexter?
You're breaking up just a little bit, but that's okay. I think the site is big enough, you can do a blend of both. So I like the park-like immediately around the building, and then the southeasterly, that can kind of remain as is, because that would probably block it better than anything else.
You just expressed exactly what I've been thinking, how to do a sort of a combination of both. Ms. DiNapoli?
Anne said what I was thinking. Great minds think alike.
Okay, so now we have
nothing against Ann Weiser, but
no, we have clearer direction now, because
Yeah.
I think also, I keep thinking about the neighbors and privacy, and I think that it going from park-like and then extending out to more natural look as you get around the borders would provide that for them. And we can supplement the external area with some evergreens that would
and the
provide.
rooms are in the back, correct? So I guess I was also thinking if it was more forest-like in the back, that would also be interesting for people.
So it sounds like a natural setting in the areas of existing retained vegetation, sort of.
With the ability to remove invasives though at any time.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there being no other discussion, I want to thank the applicant for continuing this project and for, as Liz said earlier, submitting a much more detailed proposal.
It worked.
I know that that's what we were kind of waiting on, and I feel like we just made a great leap forward in receiving this. And because the ZBA won't be acting until 3 weeks from today, I think we could go ahead and adjourn this to March 3rd, and that way you should have the results of the ZBA, and we can then move forward further. So make it a motion to adjourn this to March 3rd.
So moved. Diane DiNapoli.
Seconded, Brent Pickett.
Thank you. All in favor, please raise your hand, say aye.
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 Nays or abstentions? Only one absence. Thank you, Mr. Kaminsky. Thank you, Ms. Zerfitz. Good to see you. If you need anything in the interim, feel free to contact Pete, me, Cynthia, Tad, Liz, anybody, okay?
Thank you all.
Thanks.
Have a good evening.
Thank you. Bye. Thank
Have a
you.
good night, guys. Take care. Be safe.
Thank you again.
Yes, thank you.
Item on the agenda is workshop for a new application. This is Dutchess County SPCA. They are seeking a site plan amendment to basically build a new animal medical facility in addition to the existing building, but it's not a new use. There's already an existing animal medical facility there. It's in the old building. They're just going to relocate that so it's in a more modern area, also so it's closer to the main building, and probably more importantly, so the intake, I think, will probably be a lot easier. We have Mr. Sweeney here from PSA Studios. Peter, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you all. My name's Peter Sweeney. With PSA Studios, we are working with Dutchess County SPCA. I think the chairman sort of described generally what the issue is. Can I share my screen? Is it worth walking through the project?
Oh, yes, please do. Councilman Krupnik can, I think, arrange that.
You should be able to share.
All right. Can everybody see?
Yeah.
So this is the existing site plan, basically as it exists today. This is on the right is the existing adoption education facility, and then as the chairman described, the existing medical facility is over on the left. I assume everybody's fairly familiar with the site. The SPCA has a tremendous difficulty having these buildings separated. I think there was an initial site plan which anticipated a phase 2 off on the right-hand side of the existing adoption building. But they received some funding. They had having tremendous financial difficulties and wanted to kind of do a much more modest proposal to be able to get the kind of medical clinic facility closer to the building. There's some real issues with topography on the other side for a small project. So the proposed plan basically looks to take just the clinic facility, the clinic part of the existing building, which is actually rather small, basically 1,700 square feet, and adding it to the existing building. Since there is no change of use, there's not going to be any additional staff or visitors as a consequence. There's no change to the amount of parking that's required for the project. Basically, we've left as much of the existing we've left all of the existing parking in place. If you, just to point that out, this is existing 16 spots. What we've done is basically just shift the gravel access drive, which goes down to the back of the site, slightly to the left. The building that we're proposing, as I said, houses all of the kind of just the clinic facilities. There's some minor changes in the existing building, which I don't believe we need to review. The big one of the big things that's an issue for the facility now is they need to sort of have two different entrances and accesses to two separate buildings. So this allows them to kind of unify that and create one new public access. It's easier to control, and it's certainly easier for drop off for the public right at that point. And then the proposed addition, we're basically trying to kind of, this is the existing addition right here. You can see the entrance, which is tucked back from the front facade of the building. But the existing addition, or the proposed addition, basically scale material-wise ties into the existing project. It is, the intention is basically to kind of propose as minimal intervention as possible. The one other small kind of change that we're proposing is to, put a new generator at the rear of the building. It's basically back attached to where the existing dumpsters are, and that would be screened by the building from the front. We're proposing screening around the dumpsters, which does not have screening at this point. And I think those are the highlights. Happy to answer any questions that the board may have.
So Mr. Sweeney, before I turn this over to our consultants, if you could go to the next slide after this, or the next page.
Yep.
At the far left for the new building, there appears to be a door that exits right there. Is that really a door that would go right out, open onto the gravel driveway?
It is. It basically, they need to be able to still maintain some access. They're maintaining some kennels in the existing space, and so there is some kind of traffic that does go back and forth between the two. And there's also a quarantine requirement for certain situations where the dogs come in or cats come in, and so that's not used as a general entrance, but it's a convenience store.
Go to the next slide after this with the elevation. I'm sorry. So the wooden fence that's shown under the west elevation that's to the left or to the north, it says wood enclosure. That doesn't attach to the building. That's the enclosure for the dumpster and the generator. Am I correct?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay, that's all I wanted to say earlier. Let me start with our consultants. Ms. Franson?
Good evening. I had a comment memo that I had submitted to the board. Mr. Sweeney, did you receive a copy of that?
I did.
Okay, great. In general, in terms of procedure, this is a minor addition to a building. It's within the green belt. The use is an animal kennel, 10-acre minimum, and it is allowed by special use permit and site plan approval. In our discussions with Ms. Moss, it was determined that a special use permit had previously been granted to this application. So therefore, at this point, site plan approval is required for the addition. We also discussed that given the size of the proposed addition, which is not exceeding 4,000 square feet of gross floor area, and because it is a non-residential use, it would appear to fall under the type 2 category under seeker. And I believe there is a resolution to that effect that the planning board may act on this evening. In general, procedure-wise, a public hearing will be required once the application is sufficiently advanced that the planning board feels that it can open a public hearing. In terms of referrals, I believe the board is contemplating doing the referral to Dutchess County Planning and Development this evening. But in addition to that, a request was made and in discussions with the planning board engineer that it should be referred to the Dutchess County Department of Health just because of the existing, I think, modules that are there for some kind of treatment. And you may want to expand upon that, Mr. Sweeney. But I think in general, given the fact there was an addition to the building, that I guess was a question whether DOH needs to review it. And then in general for access, emergency access, it should be referred to the Roosevelt Fire Company as well. So I don't know if you have any questions at this point, or Pete, you want to add anything with regard to the need to refer it to DOH?
Sure. As far as the DOH, if we're gonna do a type 2 action, in my opinion, I don't know that. I mean, we do need to do the 239M for county, planning, but the health department's going to have to issue an approval anyways on the project because they are. The project is proposing a new septic tank to connect to their existing leach field. It's fairly minor, but it does require approval of the health department. So the health department's going to get this anyways. So I don't know. I don't know that we need to make a special referral to them, but they will require an approval. So
I think a courtesy referral is in order, though.
that's fine. Sure, you can do that. Absolutely. Yeah.
Go ahead and get the process started. Bonnie, before I leave you,
Sure.
In your memo, let's see. I'm trying to find it. Parking calculation necessary, just some small stuff. But we need to show the kennels. There's a kennel run that's not shown here, Mr. Sweeney.
I'm not sure that it's still there. But are you talking about in this area here?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, if it's there, I'll show it.
Is it intended that they will be demolished?
That's outside of what my conversation has been with them, but I'll clarify that and I can add that to the site plan.
To clarify, Peter, there's a proposed line that's going from the septic tank around the propane tanks to connect into a system at the other building. Is that what's happening?
There's an existing septic system for the existing medical facility. This was in coordination with the the construction manager, the builder on the project, and this was what their proposed or preferred solution is. Basically, there's no additional use being proposed, and there's an existing system for the same, the same use as presently exists.
So I think that's from, our perspective, why it's important to show the kennel buildings, because you have the line there, but it's kind of unclear, where it is in relation to those other structures. So
Okay.
it would be good to show those.
Yep.
Should I go on, Michael, or did you want to just
Yeah,
kind of
no,
highlight?
I wanted you to hit on number 25 and 26 in particular, because 26 I feel terribly guilty about. But when we first met with Mr. Sweeney, the law hadn't been adopted, and I just forgot that this was going to affect the rest of the districts around town.
Okay. So with regard to 25, that was just a general comment that if there's any kind of rooftop mechanicals, there would be a need to screen that. The big change, as per local law 1 of 2020, is that the zoning chapter was amended to state that there will be no flat roofs. And at this point, one of the elevations for the new addition shows a flat roof. And so the question is, can it be angled in some way so as to avoid the need to consider whether variances are needed? There's also, I think, a general interpretation as to whether it can be waived by the board because it's within, I believe, the development standards, where there's some considerations to be able to waive. But I think that the easy solution would be to, if you could pop up the roof so that it's angled and it's not flat. That's the first question.
But can I ask, is there a definition of what angled means?
No.
I mean, what the pitch would be?
Yeah.
So
I mean,
the
obviously,
problem is that I was going to say the problem with this is that it used to be that where a flat roof was mandated more or less by the size and scale of the building, that it could be permitted as long as it was hidden or screened with parapets, cornices, et cetera, so it didn't look flat. In this case, when we first saw this again, and I'm sorry, I feel terrible that I just wasn't thinking. But when Tad and I first met with you, I just wasn't thinking that this would affect the other districts. The thing is that while we can normally waive some site plan standards, or relax them, I should say, in this case, it now says that these are not permitted anywhere. So I'll let Victoria weigh in, but I think that sort of trumps our ability to relax the standard.
yeah, I mean, can I just, I can
Yes.
weigh in architecturally. Obviously, we could pitch the roof, but I do know that, from the beginning when we jumped on board with trying to help out the SPCA, there was a really strong desire informally to just make sure that the addition relate to, and feel cohesive with the existing building, which is a flat roof building. So, I'm happy to sort of take a look at and consider a pitched roof, but just understanding that the kind of what we put together was, I think, very much compared to what some of their original proposals were, is really trying, I think, given the kind of the budget, to tie itself in successfully to the existing building. So
I completely agree. I actually saw the original proposal, and I think that was my reaction that maybe caused this to change, because I didn't think it would be approved by the board. And this is it's harmonious and elegant, like the sort of original structure is. I want to make sure we can figure this one out, because this is small, but again, it's the way the code is written, saying that it's now no longer allowed in any district. Or they're no longer allowed in any district. So anyway, Ms. Franson, back to you, Bonnie. Anything
Sure.
else you want to highlight?
Yes, so you mentioned the outdoor kennels. Just to clarify, the real property suggests that you're on a well system. There is it says abandoned well on the existing condition sheet. Has that already been abandoned, and are you on centralized water?
we're in centralized water, that's abandoned.
Okay.
It's just a note from the original site plan.
Okay. Um, Michael touched upon the door to the new medical facility, but there is some concern that essentially the door is opening up onto a driveway because you've, had to shift the driveway a bit and are taking up some parking spaces to accommodate the driveway. And the question is, and the concern is, how does one protect someone exiting the building? Can bollards be placed there? Can there be something done there to ensure that when someone's exiting, they're not exiting, when a vehicle is passing? And striping something, there's a desire to address that.
Okay.
In general, limits of disturbance should be shown. And you do have sort of a construction plan area, but we're looking more for the limits of disturbance around the plantings and then incorporating that area where there may be some digging done to accommodate the septic line. And just to make sure that I believe you're under, 1 acre with regard to the need for any kind of SWIP.
Right.
I think most of the other comments are pretty self-explanatory. I mean, those are really highlights. We did mention in general, it's our understanding there may have been a master plan for the entire site, and there may have been buildings or uses contemplated to the east, which would be accessed by that drive. And so in general, we just want to make sure that whatever improvements are being done, that if that master plan is still in play, that any of the improvements don't, the way the driveway is being designed, et cetera, don't affect your ability to, carry out that master plan.
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak for SPCA, but I think after what we went through with them, looking at their options, there's no intention to kind of pursue another phase of work there. But is that something that we should try and make clear in this?
Would be helpful for Tad if as part of this, you just said, we're not going to be following
All right.
through on that master plan, and that it will be amending the site plan as needed. The reason why this was addressed sort of by seeker, the master plan, because they'd already told us what they plan to do, which included equine facilities, et cetera. And as you said, phase 2 is supposed to be kind of behind where the offices are right now, or to the east of that. And I know there are topographical issues there, so it's not a big deal. It's just that it's like we should probably know or not know. That's all.
All right, I will see if there's also access issues,
Yeah.
But so, all right, I'll clarify that, and I'll have to let you know.
Thank you.
And just lastly, I would say that you do show some potential plantings. So if you could be a little more detailed as to the species, quantity, planting size. And then if you are proposing any kind of lighting on the facade, on the building, then to just provide some kind of spec, or if it's the same as what already exists, to maybe add some notations.
Okay, yeah, I think we called that out somewhere. I'll try and make sure it's clear, but they're not intending, there's existing lighting under the canopy, which lights the walkway up to the entrance. So there was not, on the front, there was no new lighting, but by code, that side door will need a light. So, all right, we'll include that.
Thank you.
Yep.
Caro?
Sure. Hi, Peter, how are you? Been a while.
Yes and no.
Yeah. Peter and I do quite a bit of work together at Bard College, so he's a good man.
Likewise.
Yeah, so I mean, we don't have a lot of comments. There's not a lot of engineering things here. I don't know if I assume there's gonna be some roof leaders. So you could just make sure that those are tied into the drainage system.
Yep.
And then just a detail of the driveway for the gravel driveway. And then I mentioned earlier about the septic tank will require the approval of the county health department. But Peter, you had said that because the medical facility is being moved, that they thought to tie into the existing septic system for that building, because it's not, that way it wouldn't be any increase in use. Isn't there, is there a separate septic system for the new building or the newer
Yeah.
building?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a,
And there's like no good way to get to it.
well, this was a you know, a call from, actually it's Doug Strawinski's helping them with the construction.
Oh,
so
okay.
so
All
it's,
right.
it's like
Yeah.
old home week.
I know, right?
But I think the thought was that would actually be easier. Yeah, I mean, that was his thought.
Peter, can you explain what's going to happen with the old building then? Because if you're transferring the parking to this new building and you're transferring the septic to this new building, is it going to create a large structure that's not able to be used?
They do not have plans. We talked to, you know, Michael and Tad early on. Any proposed future use will be, they'll have to bring to the board. But for now, the only thing that is going to be there is sort of over, like, I guess, kennels, if they run out of kennel space in the existing facility. So all the offices, all of the kind of occupied space is being moved to the medical facility.
I would think, and I'll let Ted correct me if I'm wrong, but I would think the town is going to want some kind of notation indicating that this building is not to be used absent, you know, site plan review for any new use. Because again, you know, they're not evaluating parking and septic and any of the other impacts of.
Just toss in there, Victoria. The kennels that, I think I've said this before, there are already kennels inside that old building, so it wouldn't be a new use if they had to be used for overflow.
Right. Well, the dogs aren't flushing the toilets.
Right.
But the washout water from the kennels is going to the, into a system.
Right. So I just want to make sure that we're not going to have, I just want to understand when we get to the end of this, how that building can and can't be used.
Right, there was a cat room and offices in that building, and you said that all of the offices are moving to the new building?
Yeah, the offices, the clinics, basically all of that part is this is what's there, and it's spread all over the place there. But there's no office space. There's no use in that building that's proposed as of this time. So I don't think they'll have any issue if you need to put some qualification in there that the building is not being occupied. And I think, as I said when we met the first time, they completely understand that any proposed use, I mean, basically, any reasonable assessment of that building is going to indicate that it's got to get torn down, but they're not quite at that point yet. So so I'll leave the board to sort of decide how they want to put that,
Okay.
put the language in there for that.
I have one more question, and this is not legal, but the new entrance, is that just for staff, or are you
No.
going to be closing the main entrance?
No, they're two separate facilities. They need two separate entrances. The
Okay.
existing main entrance is for the adoption center. Right now, staff comes in the entrance. It's basically where this is. But if you're bringing a pet that needs medical attention, you're going to go to the clinic entrance. If you go to adopt a pet, you're going to go to the adoption entrance.
Okay, so there'll be two, okay, understood. Thank you.
I just had a couple things before we go on to the board members. So Peter, as far as the door that exits out onto the gravel drive, and I'm not like very good as far as my left hand swing and my right hand swing, but can the door, do you have like the door that swings towards the back of the site?
Well, one thing I'm just looking at right now is it can probably be an in-swing door. It's not an egress door.
Okay,
So it doesn't have to open in the direction of travel. It's a
Okay.
convenience store. So
okay.
that might slightly address it, but I agree we could stripe that area or possibly, provide some, yeah, we'll.
Yeah,
I'll
you'll
take-
look at it. And the other thing is, does the applicant have an engineer that you're gonna work with for the health department approval?
Doug has been interfacing on that, so.
I mean, I'd be glad to, I mean, I know this project is on, like a budget and, we all love the SPCA, facility. I mean, I'd be glad to offer to talk to you and like Doug and I just, I would hate to see it, get into a lot of issues with the county health department. So maybe there's some thoughts that I could offer as long as the board doesn't have an issue with me, talking to you and your construction manager on some initial thoughts I might have to try to help out a little bit.
Michael, you're on mute.
I don't believe the board will have an objection to that.
That'd be great, Pete.
All right. So, when you're ready, you contact me and we can get on the phone, with Doug or,
Okay.
we'll figure out something. All right.
Yeah, I appreciate that a lot.
Yeah, no problem.
Ross, comments?
I just want to make sure about the mechanicals for this building. Are you modifying the existing mechanicals to handle the additional square footage?
No, there'll be mechanicals. Right now, they'll be wall mounted on the back of the building. I will check and review with Doug, who's and I hear that if there's anything on the roof, we'll notate those and provide screening. It may turn out that if we have to do something with a roof, we'll incorporate that.
Anything else, Tad?
I'm trying to remember whether or not that well was officially officially abandoned and sealed according to, I think it's Department of Health standards, or is it DEC standards?
Health department standards.
Health department standards at the end of construction of the new building. I'm trying to remember. Or did they keep it as non-potable maybe?
I can't answer that. I know that, this was, it was noted on the original site plan, so it's sort of carried over.
Well, it's in the middle of the parking area, so maybe it was officially sealed. Okay.
We can check that out. We can check that out. We're going to be they're going to be dealing with the county health department anyway, so they should have a record of the well abandonment, because you have to have an engineer send in a certification letter that it was done.
Victoria, before we leave the consultants, can you weigh in on what your thoughts are about the flat roof? The prohibition on flat roofs?
So it's a tough one, and I'm not sure I want to weigh in right this moment. I think I want to talk to Tad, because it's going to set the precedent for review of future applications.
You guys confer, and if you want me there too, I'll be happy to, or any other planning board members, because yes, this is going to set a precedent for other applications. Okay, let's start with, yes.
Michael, I would just like to also check notes, because when the zoning was being put in place, I know the planning board had comments. So let me just also look at my notes to determine what the intent was, as far as if there was an expectation that it could be waived or not.
Good idea. And just for everyone's reference, Ms. Franson did write the zoning. So she has copious notes on it and can go back and check. Thank you.
Thanks.
Let's go with board members. Ms. Wasser.
First, okay. I hope there can be some resolution to the flat roof issue that doesn't set a negative precedent that helps the SPCA, because I know this is really being done on a tight budget. And I like the design. I like the elevations. I think that Peter did a great job, fitting in this piece. So I hope there can be a resolution to that. Can you unshare the screen, please?
Oh, yeah, sure.
I didn't hear, somebody spoke and I didn't hear what it was.
Somebody asked me to unshare the
Oh,
screen.
okay. So that's my general comment, that I do think that the gravel drive's got some funky angles in it, and I'll leave that to the fire department. There's like 3 or 4 different angles in that new little stretch of gravel drive. So I don't know aesthetically how that will look. It'll probably be okay, but I think the fire department, I'm curious to see if they're going to be fine with those angles on making the turn. And I saw a little typo on your environmental assessment form where it said 168 square foot addition. And I know that it was supposed to be 4 digits.
Yes.
1684. So you just to have that aligned. So I think those are my comments. I really like it and I support it, and I hope we can make this as painless as possible. And I also want to just take this time to thank Bonnie. I really, really liked the layout and the approach to your comments. I found the summary table helpful, and I love that it was page by page, which is how I look at drawings. So I really like looking at your comments page by page, and I just wanted to thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I agree, by the way. I'd already told Ms. Frenson that when I first got a chance to review it. Ms. DiNapoli, do you want to join in next?
I'll start by also thanking Bonnie for her layout of her comments. When you do something new and different, you never know if it's going to be successful, but thanks. My question about the flat roof, and I don't know if this is feasible, how we try to resolve it with the sake brewery, would that be a way of resolving it or no?
I mean,
the code has changed since the sake brewery.
But it's still slightly.
Oh, you mean just like the very small pitch?
Yeah, let's let
that would
Victoria
stop.
and I work it out. Let's let Victoria and I talk about it offline.
Okay.
And you're muted. And Weiser, you're muted.
Very small pitch.
There you go.
See, but that might be enough.
And remember also that the sake brewery has the angawa up at the front, which also disguises the flatness of the roof. But let's let legal and zoning discuss this first and see what we can do.
Otherwise, I look forward to the project moving. The one dog I had was through the SPCA.
Thank you. Mr. Pickett?
A couple comments. One, I'll second or third the way Bonnie writes up the memorandums and notes. It's very matter of fact, very laid out very well. Thank you. I like the design of the building. My concerns were, again, that access door that's on the north side, that you're stepping out onto gravel with no protection. So my thought was that you put a concrete pad there and a couple of bollards to protect it, just to make sure that you don't have any issues with it. And then the other thing was to guarantee that if on that rooftop there are mechanicals, there needs to be mechanicals that visually they're obstructed from, the parking lot, the streets or whatever. We had one that we let go a couple years ago, and every time I drive up 9G, I really regret it. And so just to make sure that that's covered, if there needs to be mechanicals on top. And also, along with the concrete and the bollards outside of that access door, to make sure there's proper lighting over it too, just to make sure people see it at night.
Okay.
Thank you, Brent. And I know the parcel you're talking about, just as a reminder to the board, our code does require that elevations show any air handlers, anything that's going to be in the rooftop for mechanicals, but we don't always get those. We get the pretty picture with, people looking like they're strolling nicely and happy at this beautiful building with our landscape that's already fully grown from 40 years. So that's why, Mr. Sweeney, that we're all emphasizing this, because we all go by that one site and go, uh-oh,
Yeah.
we missed it.
All right. Yeah, noted.
And Ms. Dexter.
Thank you. I will opine that I also like the review memorandum. It's organized very nicely, and it helped me to reorient myself. Peter, I was on the board of the SPCA and saw that original building go from the master plan all the way through final completion and opening. And so I have a lot of history on that site. And it occurred to me that it's been about 20 years since we did that original master plan, and we were looking 20, 30 years in the future. And here we are pretty much. And wow, a lot of things have changed. So many things have changed. So I can see that, sometimes that original vision, you can't, first of all, you don't need it now. We had never anticipated that by building that new adoption center, that we wouldn't need all the additional kennel space, because once you have a nice building where people like to come in and they're not afraid, because it's a welcoming building and the animals are housed healthily and they look safe and comfortable, the adoption numbers just went through the roof. And so, things change. My comment on the actual site plan, let's see if I can bring it up. So I'm looking at sheet 4, which basically shows all the new stuff that's happening. With regards to that door that opens up to the north, there was a very similar door to that on the far south of the building. They ended up having to build a little fence enclosure around it because of escaped dogs. So if that's the kennel exit, you may end up having the same type of, you never want to go directly from inside to outside with an animal that you don't know really well, and you don't know if they're going to escape on you. So if you look at the southern end of the building, you'll see how they built that little escape thing. And I'm thinking that if you needed to do that, you might end up having to lose a couple of those parking spots. Because you couldn't have that road right up against the
sorry. The one thing operationally that's a little different, it says kennel in that space, but I think it's really just a kind of receiving space. It's not like there's dog walkers who are going to be walking. The other end is dog walkers, I think, where they go in and out. So, but anyway, I'm happy to review that with their operations and see if that's, if that's a concern.
Yeah, that's one of the first things that I saw, because and again, there could be people trying to pull in and out of there. Wouldn't we want to see any of those big boulders that are currently in the parking lot and that they use to delineate the parking area on the site plan? Because they're using those as, again, to delineate the parking. The other thing I saw was there's not a lot of landscaping on that site. And if you're already putting the dumpster and you've got a nice fence, I'm not sure why you need the shrubs, because it's not, it looks like would actually be shielding it from the back of the property, and nobody's looking at it from the back or the side. So I'm not even sure you need that landscaping.
Good point.
And then the only other thing is, isn't there another exit? Did I see on, let's see, what page was that? looked like there was another exit on the back side of the building.
Yes.
Right, and that goes under that existing overhang also.
Yes.
Okay. And is that an employee entrance or a?
Yes, it's basically for maintenance and service. There's dumpster, it's access to get back to the dumpsters.
Oh, okay, okay. So I'm like, you got a lot of doors for a small space, but that's okay. I'm sure you need it. And then my thought on the roof was that just as the original building is flat, but with the mechanicals on the roof, they put up that striped.
Right, the lattice, the vertical, yeah.
The vertical latticing that maybe just some creative, I don't know, making that look like it's angled would, again, we'll let legal and zoning work that out. But if you have to hide something anyway, maybe you can use that as your get out of flat roof jail card.
Okay. All right.
But otherwise, I admire how it reminds me of like a module that just has been added onto the back and how it carries on the tone of the building. And as you're looking at it, it's not going to pop out at you and go, oh, that shouldn't be there. So I commend you. It's a very sleek design.
Thank you.
And I'm sure we can work out all these issues.
And the other Anne, Ms. Weiser.
Well, everyone said pretty much everything. So I too agreed. It's a really handsome addition to the building. It's it's seamlessly, as Anne said, carries through the whole design. And I hope as well that it's a dignified solution can be made for the roof, because it really is really attractive. So
thank you.
Mr. Sweeney, you'll be happy to know that I don't really have any additional comments. Everything was covered by my colleagues with one exception, at least tonight. I think it's in the memo. But you have listed 5.5% coverage for the site. And since you did not show the Killer Run buildings, which we did a Google Earth that could have been shot though a while back, and it showed it then. So if it's not shown on the plan, we want to make sure that you have the actual coverage calculated correctly for the lot. But everything else has been shown. And I also want to echo my colleagues. I like to think, whenever I think about architecture, I often think about Prince Charles, who once referred to, in addition to a building in London, as a monstrous carbuncle on the body of the building, which I thought was sort of, nobody uses carbuncle anymore, but if you know what that is, it's pretty monstrous anyway. This is not that case. This is actually a very sleek addition. It fits in handsomely. It snugs in perfectly. And again, I want to reiterate my apologies. We weren't thinking about how that law, when it's passed, might impact something like this, where we have a very modern and contemporary structure. So I'm confident that we'll work it out somehow, some way. We've heard some thoughts tonight about maybe the wooden enclosure, other things. So just give us a chance to discuss, and then we can take it from there. But otherwise, again, I have nothing else to add. We do have a resolution prepared tonight.
Yes.
And I believe that it's going to be introduced by Ms. Wasser, who's already ready to go.
I'm ready to rock and roll. Okay. Oh, thank you, Neil. He's got it up there. I'll read from here. Resolution classifying the action and referring the application to the Dutchess County Department of Planning and Development, Dutchess County SPCA edition, February 3rd, 2021. Resolution number 2021-02. Whereas, keep going, whereas, now therefore be it resolved that the planning board hereby, 1, classifies the project as a type 2 action under seeker, and 2, directs its secretary to refer the site plan set to the Dutchess County Department of Planning and Development pursuant to section 239M of the General Municipal Law, and 3, directs its secretary to refer the site plan set to the Roosevelt Fire Department and to the Dutchess County Department of Behavioral and Community Health.
I second that.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor, please raise your hand and signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Motion carries unanimously, no nays or abstentions. And may I get a motion to set the public hearing for this? We'll go ahead and start this for March 17th. That'll give us time to hear back from the other agencies. Is that okay with you, Mr. Sweeney?
Yes, and I guess on the flat roof issue, that, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, that's sort of the biggest thing. Will somebody be in touch before then, or is that?
Oh, you show, I thought maybe you've seen how I kind of overuse emails on this stuff. So once we have a discussion, I promise you, it'll be shot right out to you.
Okay, great.
Abuse.
Okay.
Abuse the emails. And did you, Ms. Dexter, did you make that motion for March 17th?
But I shall. Yes.
Thank you.
I make that motion.
I will second. All in favor, please raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously, no nays or abstentions.
St.
Thank you.
Patrick's Day.
All right. Thank you all very much.
And
Thank you,
Peter
Peter. Thanks
Peter
for
Sotero,
volunteering.
thank you for your generous offer to meet with Peter Sweeney.
Yeah.
I was just trying to say
appreciate it.
PSPS, and they even have the same initials.
I
And
know.
it's-
We should start a new bit company, right?
No,
No,
no.
I got one. You're
No,
welcome to
I'm
join.
winding
It's
down there, buddy.
He just sold his.
all right.
Mr. Sweeney,
Squared.
thank you for joining us. And
Thank
again,
you.
I believe you heard positive.
Yes,
comments tonight.
which I very much appreciate, and I'll pass that on to everybody at the SPCA.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
There
you.
being no other business, I think, I will make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I will second that.
Thank you. All in favor, please raise your hand, say aye.
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 Thank you, everybody. Thank you to
Thank
Councilman
you.
Krupnick for being our director, so to speak, for the
Thank
film
you.
tonight.
Happy birthday, Michael.
Whose birthday?
My Michael Fleischer.
Oh, happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
He already got to have
Happy,
his, I made his favorite lasagna, so he's already down there eating while I've been up here. So
Oh.
anyway, a pleasure to see everybody. See you again in 2 weeks.
Thank
Stay
you.
healthy.
Bye.
Bye-bye.